the pharmaceutical industry had paid off FDA to approve statins, and he talked about how they have a symbiotic relationship where they help each other. And at that point, it's like I understand what's going on because what happened was,
Dan, how did you find Carnivore?
okay, I think it was definitely on the internet about 2018. I think it was Kelly Hogan actually. I think I saw her on an interview talking to somebody, and she was really thin and attractive. I'm thinking, man, and she showed pictures of herself as a very obese when she was 10 years earlier. It's like, wow, if that works for her, and she seems real vivacious and healthy. So I did a little more research, and then I stumbled across Jordan Peterson, I believe, and Sean Baker on the Rogan show. So that's when I tried it. I tried 2018 in September. I did two-week stints on carnivore. Something happened to me that happens to young men that reach puberty. And I was 54. So I'm thinking, well, there may be something to this carnivore diet. So I started off, I was a very healthy person as a youngster. I never gained a lot of weight, and I was very athletic, did a lot of sports and stuff. So in my 20s, I got into weightlifting, jogging, and then at 28, I started playing slow pitch softball. What I knew about health at the time was from a guy named Covert Bailey. He's a expert on fitness, and he had a video he put out, and what he said basically was, if there was a health pill that someone could invent, it would be exercise. So I bought his advice completely because he was a very entertaining guy. So I thought, well, that if that's the key to health is exercise. Well, as I got older, after I quit playing softball in my late 30s, I started to get a pot belly. And plus, I've always had a lot of abdominal pain, hemorrhoids, brain fog, um, bleeding gums, feeling listless, tired, a weak immune system, not having a lot of energy. And I would get sick. I would get like flu-like symptoms once or a month or so. And I I couldn't figure out what it was. So I tried exercising because I started getting fat after I played softball. And so I started riding my bicycle, and I rode my bicycle 5,000 miles in 2.5 years. And I lost weight. I went from 230 pounds down to about 200 pounds. But eventually, when I quit the riding, it came back slowly over time. So what happened was, after I quit riding on a bicycle, I was at a library. And what happened, I found a book by a doctor named John Abramson called Overdosed America. And this is the book here. And what Abramson said was that the pharmaceutical industry had paid off FDA to approve statins. And he talked about how they have a symbiotic relationship where they help each other. And at that point, it's like, I understand what's going on, because what happened was the FDA, the people that approved statin drugs, got funding from the pharmaceutical companies, and well, anyway, the point I'm making is that they you can't trust them, because they're working together. And at that point, I quit trusting the government. So, and I still don't to this day. So after that, I started. I learned about vitamin D from a doctor named John Cannell. He was head of the Vitamin D Council, and he said people that live in senior centers, if we give them 5,000 IU of vitamin D a day, they don't get colds anymore. So I tried it, and it worked. I quit getting colds. So what happened was, after the interview, after I read the book Overdosed America, I thought, well, if the government's lying, what else are they lying about? It didn't take me long to figure out it was saturated fat consumption. That, because I realized my grandmother never had a heart attack. She lived to be 85 years old, and she fed her family, my parents, my dad, with nothing but food cooked in lard. Well, how come she never had a heart attack? And I thought, well, hold on a second. If saturated fat caused heart disease, it would have killed us off a long time ago. I started seeing health through an evolutionary perspective more than a scientific perspective at that time. So then, after the saturated fat, I learned about that. I started eating it, and I had literally one day, I ate saturated fat for dinner. I had a hamburger, and then I had a big steak with all the fat. And this time I ate it instead of cutting it off like I used to be, because I was scared of saturated fat. Well, later that night, I could feel the fat going into my brain, and I could feel almost like I was getting an oil change. It was weird. It's hard to explain. So the next morning, I had brain fog for a while. Every time I woke up, I would be like dizzy for 15 minutes, trying to, just feel something was off. But that next day, after I had that steak, it completely disappeared. And I thought, well, saturated fat must have been the reason, So after that experience, I thought, well, if saturated fat doesn't cause heart disease, what does? It didn't take me long to stumble across Robert Lustig, Sugar, the Bitter Truth. And I listened to him. And what the interesting thing about that video was that Robert Lustig talked about the difference between glucose metabolism, fructose metabolism, and alcohol metabolism. He said that fructose and alcohol are metabolized quite a bit the same way. So then I discovered Gary Taubes, his ideas. And then after Gary Taubes, I discovered the most important health guru that I've ever ran into. And his name was Richard Johnson. This is his book here. Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. He wrote a book before that called The Fat Switch. Well, anyway, I saw him on a video on YouTube with Dr. McCullough, and he talked about that. So at that point, I knew sugar was one of the reasons why you get why you get sick. So then I after I saw Kelly Hogan, I went into carnivore, and then I started losing a little bit of weight, but then I just kept cheating. I do some carnivore cheat about 5 years ago. And what happened was I got back to 230 pounds again. I think this is like summer 2019. And I started eating more and more saturated fat, more and more, carnivore. And I got down to about 225 pounds. And I'm thinking, and I'm still cheating with sugar a little bit. And I've lost weight. I'm down to 225. So let's go full carnivore. And I did. And literally I went down to 212 pounds from 230 pounds. So, and then I saw Dr. Chris Kenobi's interview about, vegetable oils being the unifying mechanism. At that point, I was doing carnivore, but I was still eating, deep fried things in restaurants. So at that point, I quit doing that. And then I got down to about 212 pounds. And for about a year, I was down. I stayed about the same because I cheat too much. I have a tendency to cheat with, soda sometimes. So what happened was after that, I was stuck at 212. And then what I did was I saw a guy on YouTube talk about high dose vitamin D. So I started taking high doses of vitamin D, and I went down from 212 down to 200 pounds. And then after that, I saw Dr. Sean O'Mara talk about sprinting, and then I started sprinting. I went down to 190 pounds. So that's how I found carnivore. And I'd like to talk a little bit about sugar, if it's okay. Sugar, most of the carnivore.
Sorry, just before we do, can I ask you a few questions about carnivore?
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So, like day to day now, how is your carnivore diet?
It's fantastic. I always I don't have brain fog anymore, and when I wake up, I'm not tired. When I used to work on carbohydrates, if I got like 5 hours sleep, 6 hours sleep, I felt like I had a weight on my head. I just couldn't wake up. It was horrible. But now that I'm carnivore, like if I get like 6 hours sleep, I'm fine. I feel normal. I had bleeding gums; those completely healed. My stomach flattened out pretty good. Uh, my hemorrhoids completely disappeared. um, I don't get sick anymore. I used to get sick. I had back pain went away too. So I mean, it's been wonderful. I mean, absolutely so happy. I had made videos about this before, but I'm so glad that I did it. I mean, my life quality has improved so much on carnivore as opposed to eating a standard diet.
Right.
So
And what way do you eat to achieve this? Like, are you eating 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day?
it's always usually two, sometimes one, but not very often. Usually two, sometimes three, but most of the time it's two. I eat bacon and eggs for breakfast and the steak or two for dinner. That's it. It's the BBE diet. Bacon, beef, bacon, and eggs. I don't eat butter because I have a barbecue in the back. I don't need to put butter in the pan.
You've been doing this for, I mean, basically 3 or 4 years now.
4.5, 5, somewhere in there. Like I said, it took me a while to become full. So
Okay. And so people around you must have noticed this. What have they said?
my wife, she did ketogenic diet and she lost weight and her health completely improved. Her gums got better. And I have some friends that I've taught about it, and they've done it too. I mean, it's hard to get people to do it because they're so indoctrinated with the typical, you know, groupthink of the average person. They trust the media, they trust the government too much, the media, the medical system, and it's hard to get. You know, it's hard because they make a real convincing argument, you know, about cholesterol, and if you hear things enough times, you're going to believe it. So that's just how we are as a species, unfortunately. People don't question very well, and they don't question what, you know, people tell them, especially official sources.
So, you've indicated you've got a bit of skepticism with government and stuff like that. So, has that led you to be a bit more skeptical about your doctor's advice?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because the doctors, you know, they are basically automatons, in my opinion, most of them. I mean, we're lucky to have guys like Dr. Barry and Dr. Chafee that actually question this stuff. And I've always been skeptical. Like I said, ever since I saw Overdose America, I've been extremely skeptical of the government. And a lot of doctors, they can't, even if they're are skeptical, they're going to keep their mouth shut because there's money involved and there's standard of care practice involved. And, you know, they want to put their children through school. So you can't, you know, you lose a lot of money if you don't toe the line when it comes to medical advice. Questioning is not something that a lot of people do anyway, even if they, you know, even if they're not, even if they do know something, they're not going to say nothing. So,
You mentioned someone's name that was very kind of crucial for me as well in getting me to the point I'm at now on carnivore, and that was Dr. Robert Lustig. And one of the eye-opening things for me was when he talked about the similarity between fructose and alcohol.
right.
So, regarding fructose and sugar generally, you have thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Well, I realized something after I found Richard Johnson's work is that I saw him on the Mercola podcast, like I said earlier, and he said things that really made a lot of evolutionary sense. What he said was, this is like 10 years ago. He said, animals in nature tightly regulate their weight. They've learned to do so really well. And what they need to do is gain weight for changing environmental conditions. He said bears will eat 10,000 berries a day in the fall to gain weight so they can hibernate. Birds will eat fruit to gain weight so they can migrate. And camels will eat dates so they can gain body fat as a source of water. Because when body fat is metabolized, it provides metabolic water. And other animals, basically all animals in nature, react to fructose this way. Glucose is not the same. The low carb community thinks that all carbohydrates cause disease, but there's some nuance to that argument. There's a lot of nuance, and people don't understand that sugars are not all the same. Glucose and fructose are metabolized differently by your body. And what fructose is nature's weight gaining and metabolism changing chemical. That's what Johnson talks about. And he says, but glucose, on the other hand, doesn't really show to cause disease in healthy people. Sick people, yes. If someone's got diabetes or some sort of metabolic problems, if you eat glucose, it gets converted to fructose in your body via the polyol pathway. The glucose will turn into sorbitol, and that sorbitol will turn into fructose, and the fructose will drive the metabolic disease, some of it. But that tends to happen in people that are sick. People that are healthy don't seem to have this happen. It's something I noticed by looking at history. Because what I did was I looked at uh, human populations for the last 10,000 years. And since we've been farming, we noticed that people that farm tend to be shorter. They tend to, their skull doesn't seem to fuse as well. They have bad teeth. They don't, and they're not as robust, but they don't get diabetes and they don't get, you know, obesity or heart disease. And I looked at all these societies and I can't find a single one that gets any kind of metabolic problems when they eat like starches, like potatoes and rice, in the absence of fructose consumption. It's when you add fructose is when you start to see these manifest. That's what history shows me. And I know someone's going to say, well, you know, the ancient Egyptians got diabetes. Well, yeah, but they ate tons of honey, which is loaded with fructose. So, and I can't, if you want to disprove my theory, all you got to do is find me a society of people anywhere on the planet that get diabetic problems or obesity when they eat starches without fructose. I can't find them. What happens is fructose is in fruit, and animals, they'll eat the fruit to gain weight. It helps the tree um, spread its seeds, right? Because that's why that, eh, you know, Dr. Chafee will always says, he says, plants are trying to kill you. And he's right, but fruits are not trying to kill you. Fruits want you to eat them because you're helping the tree plant a seed somewhere else because the seeds are not digestible. The way it helps us animals is it allows us to gain body fat to survive a famine. That's what it does. And that's why we have that symbiotic relationship with them. So fructose is the real reason, as far as I can tell, that causes metabolic disease. I mean, like I said, there's a group of people in the island of Tucacenta in the South Pacific that were studied in the 1960s. They ate a 94.6% starch diet. 94.6%. That's a lot of starch. Okay. Every day of their lives, they ate some pork and chicken. Well, according to the insulin theory of diabetes, they're eating starches every day and the insulin's pushing it down every day. So they should have diabetes, right? They don't. You hear a lot of the low fat people say, well, people in Okinawa, they eat rice and they don't have any problems. Well, yeah, they don't eat fructose either, right? So that kind of explains it. And you're saying, well, Dan, you're a carnivore. Why are you talking about starches and sugars for? I thought you were a carnivore. Well, I am a carnivore. Why am I a carnivore? Because we know by looking at history that starches are not optimum nutrition. Protein and fat is. You don't want to eat starches. The problem with starch is if you eat too much, you're eating less protein and fat, and you're not as healthy. And history clearly shows that people that eat too much starch get sicker. And just look at John McDougall. He died last week, and he ate mostly starch at 77. So, and also another reason why it's important to understand the difference between sugars is because as carnivores, a lot of us are going to cheat. We're going to cheat. We're going to eat on occasion. We're going to have something we shouldn't eat. We can't all be Kelly Hogan and Michaela Peterson. They never cheat, but most carnivores cheat on occasion. And the reason why I want people to understand the difference between starches, sugars, is because if you're going to cheat with a starch. Eat a potato on occasion, eat rice on occasion. Don't eat sodas or candy bars or pies, or don't eat fructose. Eat starch if you have to cheat. Now, I'm not saying to cheat, but that's the whole point.
You mentioned Chris Kenobi, and I've heard him speak, and he talked about I don't know if it's the same tribe that you mentioned, but he talked about a tribe somewhere that was surviving on um, basically starch only. And but his theory was not that it wasn't that they weren't consuming fructose. His theory was that um, they weren't consuming seed oils,
Right.
and that's why they were doing so well. Uh, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. History clearly shows that anybody who eats any form of extracted fructose in the form of honey or table sugar gets diabetes at some point. They'll get diabetes. And this has been true for thousands of years, back to the ancient Egyptians. And actually, before that, in the Ganges River Valley, the Indian population would get diabetes too from sweet liquids. There was a doctor named Shushruta back then that said diabetes tends to happen in those who ingest sweet liquids. And also we noticed that all the royalty in the Middle Ages, when sugar was extremely expensive, they could afford sugar and they got addicted to it. And they're the only people that got obese. They got gout. They had all kinds of problems. And there was no vegetables didn't exist. But I am certain that vegetables are definitely a factor. They must be a factor now because
Mm.
who knows how they're reacting together, sugar plus low vitamin D, chemicals, thyroid problems. There's all kinds of things that can cause obesity. I think they're probably magnifying it, but we know fructose causes obesity. We know that.
Mm.
So,
Yeah,
well, Kobe's right, I'm sure, but I don't think I would probably, my guess is that fructose is the main driver and vegetables are aggravating factor.
understood. So it's I think it also, it ends up becoming one of these discussions that it's nuanced, but I mean, we all know that at the end of the day, fructose is very, 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 very bad, right? It's
Yes,
like, yeah,
but it's good.
literally poison.
But
Well, yeah, good but bad. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, we wouldn't have survived without fructose. Animals need fructose to survive. I try to tell people, look, sugar tastes sweet for a reason. Look, if you have an evolutionary instinct to do something, there has to be an evolutionary benefit, or you wouldn't have that reason. It's sweet for a reason. It's telling you eat this because if you're walking by a tree, you see that fruit, that colored fruit, you're like, the tree's telling you, it's telling you this is survival. It's survival. That's why it's so hard to break the addiction. I used to work in a deli at a supermarket, and right next to the deli is the bakery. And one day I'm at work and I'm looking at the bakery and I'm looking at all the donuts. I'm thinking, that's a tree. That's survival. Those colored donuts, that's survival. And for some reason, the red ones are the ones that seem the best. I think I have a theory. I think, why does Coke outsell Pepsi? Because Coke is red. Pepsi's blue. I mean, Pepsi tastes better, but Coke is red. Donuts that are red seem to sell better. The donut boxes are pink. The red donuts, the cherries, apples, strawberries are all red. Red seems to be an kind of an instinctive color. I just made that up. That's just, I don't know that for sure. I just made that up. But anyway,
Yeah.
so sugar, yeah. So that's what it is. It's survival. That's how come we love sugar, and that's why it's so hard not to eat it, because your body's saying this is going to help you live, and it's hard to ignore your. I believe that I don't. Let me explain something. I don't see health like everyone else does. Everyone else, all these doctors and experts, all tend to say the same thing. What's the science say? What's the science say? Hey, I'm a big believer in science like everyone else, but you have to understand, I don't see health through a purely scientific perspective. I see it through an evolutionary perspective. And any science that's presented, it better make evolutionary sense. If it doesn't make evolutionary sense, I don't believe it. And so I won't believe it. And a lot of things don't make evolutionary sense. There's three things to me that don't make evolutionary sense. One is the idea that the sun causes skin cancer. Does not make evolutionary sense. Two, that organ meats are our most important food to eat, and that long-term fasting is for best for optimal health. I don't believe those three things, so they don't make evolutionary sense. None of those three. I have and I have eight words I came up with right here. I believe these are the 8 words to optimal health. Why? Because this is how our ancestors lived. What we did was, first of all, we ate meat, right? That's the carnivore diet. We know that meat is, our bodies are designed to digest meat. The fact that we have an appendix is basically proof that human beings evolved, that vegetables are not our primary source of fuel. Our stomach acid is 1.5, which is like scavenger animals, allows us to digest meat. And so, like I said, I'm a carnivore. Number 2 is get sun. Our ancestors evolved in the sun. They spent all day in the sun just to survive. And they got vitamin D and infrared light that helps the skin heal. And there's other chemicals the sun does for us that allow us, that make us healthy. We don't even understand it, I don't think. So I'm convinced that after diet, sun is probably the most important factor when it comes to health. It relieves depression. People that live in sun areas have a lot less autoimmune conditions. Like autoimmune conditions are worse in Russia and in the Scandinavian countries, as opposed to people living in the equator, where it's basically unheard of. And the reason why people are scared of the sun is this nonsense about the sun causing skin cancer. I don't believe the sun causes skin cancer. I know it's controversial. I think that skin cancer is actually caused by toxicity in your body, not the sun. And here's why: because sun is natural and normal. To me, the idea that the sun causes skin cancer makes about as much sense as saying oxygen causes lung cancer. It doesn't make sense. No one claims that oxygen causes lung cancer, but oxygen is 100% correlated with lung cancer. 100% of the people that get lung cancer breathe oxygen. Same is not true for sun exposure. the people that get skin cancer, the 100% of them are in the sun. So how come everyone believes oxygen, the sun causes skin cancer, while oxygen doesn't cause lung cancer? Because of the consensus. The reason why oxygen doesn't cause lung cancer, because oxygen is natural, normal, essential for health, and we evolved to have it on our skin. The same is true of the sun. It's natural, normal. We evolved to have it on our skin, and it's good for us. So, and what happens is when someone gets a basal cell carcinoma or a squamous cell carcinoma on their body, they run to the doctor and they have it burn off. They're scared it's going to cause disease, but 3.2 million people per year get these basal cell carcinomas and squamous cell carcinomas, and only 2,000 die. That's 1 in 1,600 people. So basically, the odds of you dying of those are almost zero. 3,000 people a year die from food poisoning, but millions of people aren't avoiding restaurants. Okay. What you have to worry about for skin cancer is melanoma. Melanoma is the deadly one, but melanoma is completely unrelated or uncorrelated to sun exposure. People that get less sun exposure get more melanoma. Melanoma's incidence has increased 3,500% since 1935. But now we're slathering on sunscreen and we're avoiding the sun. It's rampant now. So I don't believe the sun causes disease. I think the body causes the disease. It's my opinion that cancer is caused by a weak immune system, right? And some sort of toxicity in your body, right? So my fourth one here is avoid chemicals. Our ancestors never had any man-made chemicals in their body. And I think the chemicals are one of the main reasons we get cancer. All right, we have this. What kind of chemicals do we have in our body these days? We have chlorine in our swimming pools, fluoride in our water, mercury amalgam fillings in our teeth, insect repellent on our skin, sunscreen. We eat vegetable oils or chemicals, prescription drugs or chemicals, gasoline fumes, paint fumes. I mean, our ancestors dealt with none of these chemicals. So is it possible if we're eating a bad diet, a high with a lot of chemicals and vegetable oils, and we avoid the sun, and we have a lot of chemicals in our body, you think that might cause cancer? Cancer in about 1800 was 1 in 200 people. Now it's 1 in 3. So I don't think chemicals should be avoided the best we can. And my last subject is on this 8 words to perfect health: exercise intensely. We know that our ancestors had to run away from danger to survive. You and I and everybody else are descendants of people that could either have the ability to get food or the ability to keep from becoming food, like Dr. Doug McGuff says. So sprinting intense exercise is the best way to tell your body to get fit quick, because it says you're in danger of dying. Our ancestors had to either fight off predators or other humans or sprint away, run away. And I got some Dr. Sean O'Mara. Sean O'Mara said, "Hey, you're not going to jog away from a from a predator." Okay, so I believe that that's the way to do it. And if you look, people believe that the best way to burn body fat is to do like aerobic exercise, cardio exercise. And I can tell you where this whole thing came from. Back in the 1960s, there was a doctor named Ken Cooper. He wrote the book Aerobics. And what he and his team figured out that if you exercise at 65 to 80% of your maximum heart rate, you burn the maximum amount of fat calories per minute of exercise. And they had a formula. They said you take your age, you subtract you take the number 220, you subtract your age, and whatever that would be your maximum heart. You remember this? Or not? Are you old enough to remember this? This is back in the 70s. Well, anyway, this started the running. This started the whole jogging craze, because all they had to work with was VO2 max. And they thought, well, if you exercise, you'll burn fat calories off and you'll thin yourself down that way. But here's what they don't understand is that what matters is not how many calories you burn during an exercise as much as how much fitter you get because of the exercise you do. And as you get fitter, your body will have more energy and it'll make itself stronger so you can avoid predators. And that's why we need to exercise intensely. If you can. Some people can't do it, but you can still add intensity to your exercises, Like, you can go to a exercise bike and just go as fast as you can without hurting yourself. So that's my 4 ideas I have and that's how our ancestors lived. They lived that way, and they were healthy, they survived, and they had no problems.
Nice. So if you're talking to a friend and you want to, the friend's kind of in a situation where they're sick, the doctor's telling them you need to start taking all these drugs, this kind of thing, and
Yeah.
they say to you, "Look, how do I get healthy?" What would you advise them?
First of all, diet is number one, I believe. You got to make sure you got to eat. If it's metabolic sick, carnivore diet completely. You got to get all that other carnivore diet eliminates all that garbage out of your diet that our ancestors never ate. And then I say try to get what happens is usually people get off their beds. They'll get off their diabetes beds, but you got to tell them, make sure you let your doctor know what you're doing because you don't want, because if you're on carnivore or keto, you get results so fast, the meds can mess you up. And then you want to get them on a roll. And I say, look, as you get better and healthier, you start to feel better. You start to want to do more things. You start to want to achieve things. And then you get health. As you get healthier, then I would say try to get some exercise in. Start slowly, work your way up. And like I said, avoid those chemicals for sure. Avoid chemicals and make sure you get plenty of sun exposure. Maybe optimize your vitamin D. You know, that's what I would say because you want to live like our ancestors lived. They didn't get these diseases for the most part.
So, Dan, how can people reach out to you? What's the best way to get in contact or find you online?
Oh, I have a YouTube page called Classic Jukebox Band. Yeah, and I would like to. Can I mention? I want to mention the book I wrote about this. All my ideas are on here. I talk about a lot about the government, a lot about the medical industry, how they lie to you, big food, big pharma, big big medical, and so yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me right there. So
Great. And so people can get that book on Amazon?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I'll include some links below for that, and I'll also link to your YouTube. So thanks so much for coming on today, Dan. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story.
Oh yeah, I really loved it. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate your hard work and allowing regular people to voice what they believe because I'm a big believer in the wisdom of crowds, which means that people, that there's a collective wisdom among people, and you can't always get that from experts, you know. So I appreciate your hard work, and you're one of the hardest working guys in the carnivore community, and I appreciate you. Just so you know.